Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Didn't intend to profit off a scammer, but my hands were tied." Years ago, I was quite involved in an active online community of analog audio hobbyists. People would occasionally put hardware and music up for sale on the message board we used. I'd been looking for a specific piece of hardware for several years to no avail. It was extremely rare and had never been sold in the US, so any examples would have been imported from Japan. One of these machines popped up for sale from someone in the community and I jumped on it. The guy offering it wasn't new but wasn't terribly active. Somehow he'd obtained pics that weren't on the net and or not easily searchable and ginned up a fake Japanese bill of sale. In hindsight, he may have seen one for sale and stolen the images from that. Regardless, it all seemed legitimate enough to induce me to go through with the transaction. So, PayPal sent and he says it'll ship in about a week. Then, the excuses begin. From he's been busy to out of town to his assistant shipped it but didn't send the tracking number to providing a fake tracking number. Then, he just quit responding to calls or emails. Turns out the number he'd given me was a forwarding service that he subsequently disconnected. He also disappeared from the forum. He had, however, used his real name and a real PayPal account. I filed a PayPal claim, and of course they denied the claim on some technicality. I'm sure he was counting on this occurring. This is where the revenge begins with an unintended bonus. All I wanted was to make sure the guy knew I'd find him and get to him. I'd called the police and reported matters but they couldn't have given less of a damn. I decided to find him myself, and found an old wedding announcement that had been posted on the net. I searched his wife's name and found mention of her being out on leave to give birth to their first child on her work website. Bingo! I had a small gift sent to her workplace with my name on it, and called her work to say that I'm an old friend and don't have their contact info but wanted to wish them congratulations on the new child, and that I'd come see them soon. I had visions of his wife saying how nice it is that someone sent a gift to her work, etc., and asking who I was. This apparently spooked him, because a cashier's check showed up for the full amount. Now, what he hadn't counted on, and I didn't tell him, was that I'd filed a charge back with American Express after PayPal denied the claim. My conundrum was this: the Amex investigation was ongoing, and I had no idea if they'd overturn the chargeback or not. I also had no idea if the cashier's check was legit. I've heard of counterfeit checks being returned up to 45 days later. So I truly didn't intend to profit off this. But I did. The Amex chargeback was resolved in my favor, which PayPal clawed back from his account shortly after the check was proven good. The kicker is, the guy had the gall to email and threaten to try to have me charged with fraud for the chargeback when he'd already sent the check. I simply responded and said, "Hey. Great to finally hear from you. Glad you're doing well, how's the baby? Listen, I'm sure there's just been a mix-up and I'll be happy to pay everything just as soon I get the machine. I'm sure you understand why I want to receive it before I pay at this point. Of course, if you do want to call the police, you're welcome to explain to them how you attempted to defraud me by selling something you never possessed in the first place. Your call." Never heard another word. I just hope his kid didn't have to go without diapers. The next one is titled, "The Con Man." My mother and the revenge story that followed. Be warned. This is a very long story. I have shortened it and left out some details, so any clarifications please ask. What occurred happened over the course of a year. My mum is a very sweet lady. Divorced. 70 years old, still works full-time. Trusting of everybody. She still lives in my family home and rents out a room to help with the bills and the company. It's a fairly large house. We have had a string of lodgers live in the house over the years, but this one was nothing like we ever expected. Enter James, a well-presented, well-spoken man who worked in executive recruitment. 52 years old, thinning on top, a golden handshake and an air of superiority. He came telling tales of divorce and looking for somewhere to live that felt like a family home and not a hotel room. Strange, but he sold the story to my mums. He has ID, he has business cards backing up his claim of employment. He seems like an ideal lodger. Things go normally for half a year. He seems like a nice guy. He is constantly telling us that he works for a recruitment company and is waiting on delivery of a Jaguar company car. This was the first red flag. He regales us with stories of his past and tells my mum he was in the army in his younger years. Specifically the parachute regiment. After a while he begins to make romantic moves with my mum and spending more and more time together. He takes a copy of my CV and offers to help me find better employment, either at his company or at one of his clients. Even going so far as to arrange meeting with me to help me with my interview techniques. He pays his rent on time, often with a little extra for my mum. Keeps saying he will be moving back out into his own property soon. This is where things start to fall apart. It is now 8 months and the Jaguar has never arrived. He has an excuse for everything. Job interviews I am lined up for mysteriously start being cancelled. He is now romantically involved with my mother. I get a little suspicious, but my suspicions are cooled when I am involved in a 3-way phone conversation with himself and a client as a primary job interview for an incredibly prestigious job which I am afterwards told went very well and I would have a sit down shortly. He even starts offering to buy my mother and myself new cars. He arrives with brochures and books test drives for various cars. It was fun, but it just didn't sit well with me. I should not have done it. But I had a quick search of his room and found IDs with 2 different names and paperwork in a black backpack that suggested he had been arrested before. I immediately tried to explain the situation to my mum, who dismissed it without reason. Rose-tinted glasses, and an almighty argument starts. I leave the house, covering all my tracks. I never found out who the client was on the phone. A week later I get a phone call from a recruitment firm, asking me who I am and why I was in their system. It turns out that Tony was a recruiter who had set up a side business with an existing recruitment agency to provide high-end recruitment. The owner, business partner, was impressed with his credentials, but so far he had failed to deliver on just about everything and started missing days in the office. Because of this they had gone through his email and found one from me when I sent him my CV. At first they suspected me of being a client he was dealing with off the books. But it later turned out everything he had promised the company had been a lie. He was claiming commission for placing staff at companies that either never show up or didn't exist at all. A 2-hour phone call with the CEO of this company was enough to prove all my suspicions. This guy was either a pathological liar or a con man. It took a very long conversation with my mum, followed by an argument and then another conversation to get her to see sense. It was only then that she shared more details I had previously not known. He had been inquiring about her will more and more and the value of the house. Promised her holidays that never surfaced, and his behavior was becoming stranger and stranger. It was at first a bit embarrassing, so many red flags we had both either not seen or ignored. But with the rose-tinted glasses firmly taken off it was also clear. My mum had just returned from having a meal with Tony before I had a sit down with her. Our plan was to search his room, find evidence and either go to the police or wait for him to return. The first thing I did was try and locate his backpack along with the IDs, but it was gone. Everything else was still in the room but that bag. I had a sinking feeling that he had already guessed the game was up. I was being far too aggressive with my quest for information and had somehow tipped him off. We waited for him to return. He never returned. He had realized the game was up. I'm not sure how, but just like that he was gone. My mum was heartbroken, I was stressed. We realized a lot of the things he had promised had been lies. It hurt. I had taken days off work for job interviews that never transpired. My mum had started to work less and less under promises that she would be financially supported by him. I needed my revenge. I needed to make him pay for hurting my family, hurting me, hurting my mum. We can only speculate what his end plan was. We suspect he was after the house. But she's incredibly healthy by normal standards, let alone a 70-year-old woman. God knows what he had planned to do. I didn't sleep that night. The first thing I did was changing the locks and get a close friend to watch the house. I then told the people next door what had happened and asked them to keep an eye out. I then logged a complaint with the police via a friend in the force and set to work. The first piece of revenge. Take every possession he had and donate it to the local homeless shelter. The sharp suits, shoes unworn and still in boxes, his tie collection. Class rings, jewelry. All given to the homeless. It took 2 trips in my truck to move them, but we did it. I hope we had some very well-dressed homeless people that year. I hope the suits helped them with job interviews. I then called his now ex-business partner, boss, and confirmed what had happened. The two of us set to work contacting every recruitment company in the area with a copy of his photo, names and a brief explanation that he was not to be trusted. We also went through a list of his previous employers, customers. Many of them confirmed similar strange goings-on and agreed to spread the word. I then contacted a friend who actually was in the parachute regiment. They can find no record of his existence. He claimed he saw combat in one particular war which would have made him eligible for a certain medal or commendation. No record is found of this. The army takes a dim view of people falsifying service. So we had taken his job and all the possessions he had except the clothes on his back and his car. God, I wanted that car. I wanted to crush it. Next was to remove his support network. We tried to trace his family, eventually finding the name and number of his ex-wife. We called her. She was a lovely woman who confirmed what we thought. It was not the first time suspicious goings-on had happened, but it was certainly the worst it had been. She had left him over his escalating behavior. She suspects the behavior to be from a breakdown of some kind. Tells us he used to be very successful but lost his job and it set him on a downward spiral. She talks to their 3 children who immediately wash their hands of him. She confirms his lack of military service and fills in a lot of blanks for us. I had taken from him his home, his job, his career, his clothes and now his family. The police now had a report and we're looking for him too, and my friend in the parachute regiment told me not to worry about whatever they were doing about it, just to know they knew about it. I spent a week touring the homeless shelters, hospitals and hotels looking for him. I drove over 800 miles at night looking for his car. We will never know where he went, but I never found him or his car. His family have since had contact and his youngest son knows where he is. They assure me he checked into a facility and is receiving help. I'm not convinced, but I'm not going to shake a teenage boy down for the location of him. His name and face is seared into my mind and I want nothing more than to take from him his Heath, but even I have a limit. But one day I will come across him again. I don't know what I will do then. The last one is titled, One Hell of an Omelette. We all know the saying, in order to make an omelette, you gotta crack a few eggs. A very down-to-earth saying with a lot of meaning and truth behind it. I guess you can even apply this saying to revenge in some cases, particularly my story of revenge. A story of revenge so great that it might be one of the best cases of revenge so far in the year 2016, or at least I tell myself that. In the end, unfortunately, there was some collateral damage, but hey, you know the saying. I am a former Marine living in a semi-small town that I am not from, trying to make ends meet while I wait for my tech school to start this summer. I've been out of the Marines for a few years now. And after partying day in and day out and making ends meet by bartending at various bars around my state, I have finally convinced myself that it's time to stop being a man-child and work toward a stable career. Hence, I've enrolled myself in a tech school. In the meantime, I figured can squeeze as much as I can out of the service industry until I complete school and graduate. Well, that was the plan and it still is, but not at the restaurant per bar I thought it would be. I moved to this town from another state with my girlfriend, due to a tragedy in her family. After living off savings for a few months, I decided to snag a job to make things easier to stay afloat. I ended up at a quaint little restaurant very close to where my girlfriend worked. A restaurant recently reopened by its corporate ownership after a terrible franchise owner had control of it. All of the staff were new hires, from the top to the bottom. The restaurant was now full service, as opposed to ordering at a counter. It had a beautiful mahogany bar that meshed well with the theme of the restaurant that was sectioned off from the dining side of it. Great food and even better drink specials, the perfect place for me to make ends meet while I attend school. It was convenient in so many ways. My girlfriend and I could save gas by driving in one vehicle when our schedules matched. She could come eat lunch or dinner on her break and get a discount on food. Things just seemed perfect. When I first started working at this restaurant, management seemed to really like having me around. I was very good at entertaining guests, I brought people into the bar, and I was great at making drinks. One night stands out the most. I had a couple walk into the restaurant minutes from closing. Often when this happens, you will get a server who is upset that they have to do their job a little longer, and that will reflect on their service. Not me, it is their money and we are still technically open 10 minutes until we close, so I am going to treat these guests just like I would any other guest. The couple clearly had a great night and left me a very big tip. The next day I was shown an email that was sent to corporate, with nothing but praises about my service and attitude. I assumed it was from the same couple, but who knows. After that incident, the atmosphere and management's attitude toward me seemed to negatively shift. Before we get into that though, let's discuss the management team. First we have the GM, let's call him Jack. Jack is a round man in his early 30s who on the surface seems like a stand-up guy. You'd think he'd have your back until the bitter end when you first meet him. Then we have Nessa, the assistant GM. Nessa is a short woman in her late 40s. My first impressions was that she is a quiet but professional woman, does things by the book. And finally we have Courtney. Courtney was the bar manager. I will explain the quotations a little further in the story. From the get-go, Courtney rubbed me the wrong way. Courtney was in her late 30s and never really smiled. Something about her just seemed dishonest. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. Oh, and I should also mention Kara. Kara was a woman about 29 years old and she was best friends with Jack, the GM. She was the other bartender for the restaurant that would work shifts that I didn't work. In the end I had nothing but great things to say about Kara, and I didn't want things to end the way they did, but hey, you know the saying. Now back to the story. After receiving the positive review, I noticed I would get flack from both Nessa and Courtney for little things. They would reprimand me in rude ways without any tact. One night, Nessa out of nowhere told me I was arrogant. Of course I defended myself and this caused a dispute that ended up with both of us apologizing. I still have no idea what I was apologizing for, but I just wanted a peaceful end to the matter. Another day, Courtney pulled me aside as I came in for my shift, and told me that guests had told her that I was giving them free drinks. She tried to get me to fess up to this and I vehemently denied the claims. I even told her to check the cameras or I will have Jack check the cameras. I never ever stole from the bar, or gave people free drinks. Then there was that time I came in for a shift and Courtney immediately jumped down my throat for leaving tables a mess, later proven to be a lie, before leaving the bar after closing. She says this as she walks out the door from her morning shift leaving 3 tables unbussed. It was like something out of a comedy sketch. Another thing that may have struck you as odd, Courtney the bar manager was scheduling herself bar shifts, while getting management pay. Odd, right? My theory on this sudden change of attitude toward me from the management is that it may have not been so sudden at all. I don't think Courtney liked me from the start. I remember one time when I was training, I had to make an easy drink for a guest because she didn't know how to make it. She put pineapple juice in a Long Island iced tea. Yuck. This was probably embarrassing for her, and I remember the guest making a comment along the lines of, maybe he should be bar manager. Ha ha ha, said in jest, but I could tell that it really upset Courtney. I also was told that by another employee, that during a busy night over the holidays, Courtney told Nessa and Jack that she thought I was stealing from the bar. I cannot verify these claims, but after the conclusion of everything that happened, I wouldn't put it past Courtney. This negative stigma toward me most likely rubbed off on Jack, because surely enough, his attitude toward me changed. I started to feel held hostage and regretting going to work. I felt as though my stature was being diminished behind my back, my reputation was being tarnished. I was sinking in quicksand and had no way of defending myself when all these claims were made behind my back. One shift, my girlfriend was on her lunch break, and while I was in the back getting side work done, Jack had made a rude comment to her or was very rude to her. She wasn't clear when she told me about it later that night, but she didn't feel comfortable going back in there. Her feelings were hurt. I confronted Jack about this and he just brushed it off and quickly changed the subject by telling me to find something to do. All of this hate would soon hit a boiling point, and that's where the omelette comes in. A little over a week ago, I was enjoying a night off. Me and the girlfriend watched some Making a Murderer, ironically relevant to the story, before both drifting off to sleep. I woke up bright and early the next day, did some laundry and got some cleaning done while my girlfriend slept in. She works 2 jobs and deserves it. I took a shower and prepared to head into work, hopefully making some good tips. I walk in 5 minutes early and the managers are all at a table outside of the bar talking. They see me walk in and sat me down. They told me that the night before, someone had served a minor some drinks and it got reported to the police somehow. Phew, it wasn't me, I thought. I didn't even work that night and I always ID people I am unsure of. They told me that I need to be sure to always ID people and I assured them that I do. Both Jack and Nessa walked off to the dining side. I talked with Courtney a bit and the conversation was a bit odd. She said, yeah, we need to be sure to ID people and you probably just assumed he was 21. I cut her off and told her that it wasn't me who worked last night. She stuttered back, "Oh, I meant Kara." Yeah, it was Kara who messed up. Kara, who I really loved working with, but who was also best friends with Jack. So you can assume how things were taken care of. This would have immediately been my termination if it were me in Kara's shoes. I didn't hold any grudge, I was glad she kept her job. After the doors were locked that night, Nessa came up to me and brought up the underage incident. Again, it was odd. She spoke kind of loud but not rudely and told me I need to be sure and ID people from now on so this doesn't happen again. I stood my ground. I told her that with all due respect, it wasn't me who served the kid. She said, "Look, I know, I am just saying. What were they trying to pull here?" I had the next day off, chilling in my apartment all by myself, playing Hearthstone, eating like a pig. When my phone buzzes, it was a notification telling me that I need to come in to work an hour early because the managers were having a meeting. No sweat, more hours, more money. I continue doing my thing. The next day I go in an hour early as instructed. Once again, the managers are sitting at a table near the bar. They all stare at me as I walk in. Things didn't seem right. Jack tells me that he needs to talk to me. Jack and Nessa both sit me down in the dining area. Jack tells me that he heard that I had a dispute with Nessa a few weeks back, and he can't have that attitude around here. He tells me he is letting me go. I was shocked. I told him that me and Nessa already hashed out our differences and this happened weeks ago. I look over at Nessa and she shoots me a smirk. "Well, now you are talking to your GM about it." First felt the Marine in me start to come out. I was getting angry and about to do something stupid. It took everything in me not to throw the table over and punch Jack right in the jaw. I took a deep breath, stood up, told them good to go, and walked out. And Courtney was sure to give me a sarcastic bye as I walked out the door. What the hell just happened? This was weeks ago and they are firing me for this? This can't be right. I get to my car and slam my hands down on the steering wheel. I was so angry. I just wanted to call my girlfriend and hear her tell me everything was going to be all right. I grab my phone and find her name in my contacts. I'm thinking to myself how I am going to break the news. "Babe, they fired me for no reason. Jack is such a ducking prick. Kara served someone underage and nothing came of that, but they fire me for something that happened weeks ago." I didn't hit the call button. I put my phone down. It all hit me at once. These motherduckers were trying to burn me for what Kara did. Since it got reported to the police, somebody needed to pay, and it sure as hell wasn't going to be Kara. I peeled out as I left the parking lot, not because I was angry, but because I needed to act fast. If I didn't act fast, they would get away with murder. Most of the people who join the Marines join to fight. As crazy as this sounds, this is largely why people enlist in the infantry side of Marines. People like us have a desire to fight, and the Marines is a great outlet. Most Marines love fighting, most of us love conflict. We thrive off of it, and we know how to react when the cards aren't in our favor. We are generally some of the nicest and loyal people you will ever meet, but you don't duck with a US Marine. I open my door and rush to grab my laptop. My girlfriend asks me what's wrong and I quickly say, "Nothing babe, got fired, love you." Grab my laptop and sit on my recliner. She says, "What?" I just motion with my hands 1 second as I load up Google. I find the restaurant's corporate website. It didn't have a number for corporate, but it did have the email address of every single franchise in the company. Even better, I thought to myself. So I wrote a long email to a franchise, copied and pasted it to every other one. I explained in detail about the favoritism that was happening with Jack and Kara. I explained how Kara had served someone underage and I had the feelings they were trying to pin it on me. I explained how Courtney would get manager pay while taking tips as a bartender. I explained how Nessa would occasionally have me make a drink and she would give it to her teenage daughter, who also worked at the restaurant. I provided times, dates, and even showed them the email I sent to our state's alcohol control about the underage drinking incidents to ensure my hands were clean. I explained how an expensive bottle of Jack Daniel's Sinatra seemed to have a leak in it nights after Jack had worked. Every bit of dirt I ever saw or heard about I put in the email, and I let every franchise in the company know about it. I demanded that I get a call back, and I also demanded that I get my termination papers to make sure I wasn't being framed. I typed so fast and things just seemed to melt into place as I made the email. My fingers were my weapon. You don't duck with a Marine. My girlfriend is staring at me the entire time. What the hell is going on? I finish the email and explain to her the situation. She asks me if I am afraid others will get into trouble. I tell her, well, you know the saying. I fill out applications and the same day I get a call from a very well-known and popular restaurant. They want me to come in for an interview the next day. Perfect. I already have another job. I didn't hear from corporate at all that day. It was very late in the afternoon, so I expected as much. The next day I get a phone call early in the morning. It is corporate HR that owns the restaurant that I worked at. She tells me that they are on their way to the restaurant to investigate my claims. She asks me a bunch of questions. I am guessing I was being recorded. I stayed consistent and honest. She tells me all of the things I mentioned in the email were 100% against company policy. But the claims would be investigated before any action was taken. I asked her if they have access to the camera feed. She assured me that they did. Thank God for cameras. She told me to call back immediately if I could remember anything else that was going on. We hung up and I got dressed and headed out the door for my interview at a new potential job. Well, the interview couldn't gone of better. I met most of the management at this team and I got such an amazing vibe from them. They even want to cross-train me as a bartender almost immediately. Most of the time, this place only promotes from within. They must have really liked me. So I got the job and I am going to try my hardest to be a great employee. Anyways, back to my revenge story. I later got word from an insider that they did indeed try and pin the underage incident on me. Little did they know. I am laying in bed that same night, drifting off into sleep listening to Sam Harris's podcast. My girlfriend is sitting up in bed browsing Facebook. All of a sudden, she gasps. She startled me because I was almost asleep. I jump up and asks her what's wrong. She shows me her phone. Hey, wow. I said calmly. I guess things were worse off there than I thought, but damn, I didn't expect things to get taken that far. Well, you don't duck with a Marine, I thought. I got out of bed and made some sweet tea. Do you feel bad? The girlfriend said. Well babe, you know the saying. Thanks for listening.